Hi, welcome again. This is the Charlotte Technology Podcast, where we talk about startups and the things going on in the technology space in the city. Today we're going to be talking about conferences and meetups and user groups that are occurring in the city every day. And I'm joined by a group of people who've been involved in a number of those in the city to talk about what those events are, what happens at the events, and how they basically help the city grow. So over to my left here, I have Frank Waite, who is the Business Development Manager at Etain Group. I have say hello. I have Jim Van Fleet, who, Jim, if you'd like to tell us a bit about who you are.
Yeah, why don't we back up?
Yeah, shall we go? Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I'm the Director of Business Development for Etain Group. We focus on full life cycle technology development in both consulting and staffing capacities. We're sort of development language agnostic. However, we are a Microsoft Gold certified partner, so we are very active in the .NET community, the SharePoint community, and as well as some of the other user groups. We do sponsor the Java user group. We've sponsored Barcamp, so we're pretty active in a lot of the different community areas. But specifically today, I'll probably touch on some of the Microsoft-centric user groups.
Cool, thank you, Frank.
All right, that was better.
At this point, I'll just apologise. Our usual moderator is not available today, so I will be standing in. So keep criticism until the end. Jim Van Fleet, if you'd like to.
Sure. My name is Jim Van Fleet. I'm here today because of my involvement as the organizer of the Ruby Meetup group here in Charlotte. And I'm sure we'll be getting into that. We've had I try to be a little bit involved in a lot of different things going on as I'm trying to learn my way around town. And so I might have a thing or three to say about some other random things as it happens.
That's all good.
Let's hope.
And to my right, I have Justin Ruckman.
Hey, I'm one of the original organizers for Barcamp Charlotte, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. But that's my capacity for this podcast.
And Justin, you're also involved in the CLT blog.
Yep.
And some of the other.
Yeah, my partner Matt Tyndall and I started that about 2 years ago. So, CLTblog.com.
And finally, we have Tyler Williams.
Yep, I'm here to talk about two of the groups. One is the Charlotte Java Users Group, which is a technical developers group. I'm a Java J2EE database developer here in Charlotte, so in that capacity, I organize that group. And then we're bringing the Startup Weekend event to Charlotte in May, and so I'm here to talk about that event as well.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So Charlotte itself, sometimes it's not easy when you first come to the city to kind of see all the events and all the things that are actually happening. Although there is, a lot of things going on. To talk about some of the groups specifically, before we kind of jump into like what each one of these groups really do, what's it, Tyler, how do you feel that the kind of user community or the groups system kind of works in Charlotte? Is it lively? Is it?
It's ad hoc, so you end up talking to people who should be coming to certain groups but aren't, and then they find out about it, they kind of show up, and then you miss them for a year, and then they show up again a year later. So it's missing a little bit of the continuity, but I think the longer you're around, you and I kind of both started the Java Users Group, and initially it was just a handful of folks, and now it's regularly 15 to 20 people. So, it does take a while to get that traction because you have, trouble with the continuity, but I think the groups that are here a long time and are willing to be patient and put in the effort are definitely groups that will thrive.
Okay. So, Jim, you arrange a user group yourself. Mm-hmm. How do you find it getting the word out? Like, how do you kind of get the word out to people?
Well, I would call that one of the largest challenges in running the group. Maybe that's only for me personally, but I think that the marketing side of things and how to do that part of it, it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people in the developer community. I mean, they're used to working with ones and zeros and their favorite people, the business analysts, and that's sort of like as far as it gets. And the work of building a group is very difficult to that mindset, which I happen to have. Now, that said, I've had to go through this before. I started a Ruby meetup group in Richmond, Virginia as well, and that did teach me a lot of positive lessons. The techniques that I use are almost entirely social media based. There was one interesting part of the story is that there's something new that I'm trying for the first time in Charlotte, because my predecessor as the Ruby Meetup group organizer actually did select meetup.com, which I probably would never have done because it's a pay website, and in the group that I know, there's almost kind of a stigma that comes along with using something like that. So, but it has a lot of excellent tools for finding people who are interested. I know that, even if you feel like, well, if they even did a simple Java search, or, a simple Google search for Java Charlotte or Java and Ruby, they would have come up with it, but instead they'll find their way onto, some waiting list in meetup.com, and you can hit them up, and sometimes they end up joining. I mean, at the very least, I've had interesting conversations with people that I would never have known were in town. So then when you add that to things like, having a Twitter account to try to keep people, somewhat engaged, or they can find you there. We are fortunate enough to have an excellent host that allows us to tape our speakers, which actually makes us a more attractive speaking gig than most for our speakers. Basically just working your mailing list. You've got to constantly be looking to find out why people aren't coming that you already know about. Try to find people that you don't know about, involved, even by joining the group or signing up. And, then the last piece of it that I find somewhat effective is trying to go to other like-minded groups in nearby areas. We've had good success with that in both Richmond, and to a somewhat lesser extent here. I haven't felt like I've on firm enough ground here to start reaching out, but that's one for the upcoming list.
Oh, and Frank, you yourself have acted through your company to actually sponsor some of these user groups. I mean, we've heard a bit about like how they kind of start. How do you think they help you as an organization to be associated with user groups and such like?
I mean, especially in a community like Charlotte that is so relationship based and so referral based, and sort of as we try to build the technology community outside of the big institutions, it just word of mouth and being sort of front and center with a lot of that is very helpful, and creating a subject matter expertise, and we really focus on, even though we sponsor them, and certainly we're in the business of growing our business, we are very conscious of not making them sales events. And as the sales guy, it's funny to say that, but I mean, we go out of our way to not make it an Etain commercial. We're there to help the community, because as we strengthen the technology community here, all the projects, our clients, all the things we're working on do get better. I mean, we do find, especially in the business we're in, I mean, the good people are all working. I mean, or most of them are. I mean, and so it's the pool is still somewhat limited. So the more you're out there in the community, and again, from a partner ecosystem perspective, when I need something that's outside of my core, I go into that community that is largely driven by the user groups and the and the bar camps and things where we meet people. And as people are looking for maybe the next opportunity or a partner opportunity, now they know who to call on our side as well. So it's really I think strengthened that sense of community, regardless of which technology we're helping with.
So yeah, I mean, we've talked a bit about like the user groups, and obviously the user groups service like a certain a group that's specialized in usually like some technology, and I'll come back and talk a bit about that in a minute. Justin, you obviously like got involved at the very beginning to kind of start Barcamp. Barcamp, maybe just now you could just explain to us, what Barcamp is.
Sure. So Barcamp was initially a response to something called Food Camp that the big tech publisher O'Reilly started in, I guess it'd be just the Silicon Valley area in general. I'm not sure what.
San Francisco, I think.
San Francisco, okay. Which was a very exclusive, invite-only, inner circle kind of meeting. Although very good, it excluded a lot of people who otherwise would have been interested in participating in these kinds of events, talking about the current state of tech and media and whatnot. So as a response to that, I think around 2004, 2005, Chris Messina and Miss Rogue on Twitter, I forget her real name, I always do that. Anyway, they started Barcamp. Foo and bar are both like programming puns, bar being, I guess, in this case, the opposite of foo, whatever. Barcamp, which was at that time conceived to be the exact opposite. So while still focusing on tech and media, it's organized, from the ground up. So even, down from the speakers presenting to the topics being covered to the sponsors, pushing forward the event, everything is organized kind of by the community. Some of the big staples are that you can't have a sponsor over a certain amount of money because they want it to be, they want even small businesses to be kind of represented fairly. So basically these events, on the morning of the event, they start off with the crowd coming together and kind of like everyone pitching ideas they want to talk about, various tech subjects, various media subjects. It's kind of like the current state of technology and business and computing and blah, blah, blah. People pitching these topics, then everybody votes on the ones that they're most interested in, and then you kind of like build the schedule up from there. So in the end, you get this conference that's not only kind of organized by the people, but for the people, and it's very relevant to what the current issues are. You might think going up a month or two to the event that what kind of things should be covered, and then the day before something crazy happens, like some new product is launched or something like that, and it kind of it's very responsive to the current state of things. So that's, I guess, it in a nutshell.
So, Jim, you've been to Barcamp, I assume.
Yes.
I mean, what would you say contrasts between like the user groups in Charlotte and like the Barcamp type of thing?
I think that its biggest strength lies in something that Frank alluded to, which is, we have relatively few opportunities to sort of mix as a larger group with those who are either involved with different technologies or different kind of functions in terms of what they do on a day in and day out basis. And then also in particular in the one here, you'll never know what you'll find. You might end up down in the rabbit hole or making balloon animals. And sometimes these are the kinds of things that you don't realize how they're helping, but they help. And I think that the contrast is about depth versus breadth. I mean, you have a chance with the bar camps that you attend to either you can present about something that you know very deeply, you can attend something that you might never have otherwise gone to, but you know that you're going to hear about something that the presenter is passionate about, and that there are going to be other people in the audience that are interested in it, and you can try to connect with them, see who might be on the same level as you. Sometimes finding people to learn together with is one of the best outcomes that you can have out of a social group, and versus something like the user group meetings tend to be very much more focused, and although it does occasionally happen, you'll almost never see some person who doesn't feel comfortable presenting say, hey, you know what, why don't we all just talk about this thing for an hour? But that is, that's been pitched and has succeeded at many bar camps. It's more along the lines, particularly speaking for my own group here as opposed to the one in Richmond, there are a lot of people here using Ruby in a very serious way at their day job. And there are even, it's almost an equal size community who are developers who are solving difficult problems in languages other than Ruby that are looking for a way to make their life better by using Ruby. And so they're not necessarily interested in, in an hour-long overview, or they want real technical content. They want something that they can take back and use. And I don't know I'm certain that there are some things like that at bar camp, but because of its more like willy-nilly, who knows what's going to be happening nature, you're not typically in the mindset for like, all right, I'm going to focus on something and really learn it. It's more of like a, hey, would you like this? It's a chance to sample diverse ideas and get involved with the community, and that's its real strength compared to coming to a user group meeting, I would say.
So that's like an interesting point. That in some ways, bar camp, being more of an unconference, is kind of like a salad bar of different ideas.
Awesome salad bar.
Awesome salad. And while the user groups tend to be more focused, Tyler, I'd like to ask you this: in the user groups, Charlotte itself has a predominance of like larger industries. Do you find like a lot of the attendees of the user groups come because they feel they need to learn something for their job, or do you feel like they come for the community aspects?
Great question.
We actually did a survey, and it was very equally balanced between people who are trying to learn new aspects of the technology that you're dealing with, to people who are just wanted to network, meet, be part of the community, help with the community, build the community. So I think you're going to find different focus from different, perspectives. Like one person just wants to be there every single time. They don't really care what the topic is. They'll have, in our meetings anyway, a networking session beforehand or afterwards where people are just kind of floating around and talking to different people that they know, that they've met, and talking about what they're working on, what problems they might be having, and get some ideas or input from those folks. And other people only show up when there's a specific topic that really interests them. So it's a variety for sure.
It's a kind of even mix between
absolutely.
those people in the community.
Absolutely.
Frank, you work as well with the Microsoft side of the house, and I think we've all, it's a very different model. And I think a part of that is because I would imagine Microsoft themselves sponsor some of these activities. Is that really true? Do Microsoft invest heavily in the community events, or?
It's a classic consulting answer. It depends. It depends on the event. I mean, like the Enterprise Developers Guild is always at the Microsoft campus, but some of the SharePoint stuff is actually, you see very little Microsoft participation, depending. It really depends on kind of who's driving it and what the topics are. But I think the attempt now is to in that Microsoft side of things get away from some of the structure of that Microsoft may try to push on it and be more willy-nilly and be more. I would definitely reiterate what's been said is I think if you look at specifically with SharePoint, the user group is much more focused and much more almost like lecture focused, where SharePoint Saturday is sort of the equivalent of a bar camp where there are different tracks based on users, developers, designers, and it's very driven by the group. What do we want to focus on today? And certainly there's agendas going into it, and because it's product focused, there's certain things that are sort of out there from new releases and things to know and et cetera. But it is a little bit, the contrast is there as well in that community. So I would say that's consistent with bar camp versus the specific user groups.
I haven't really heard of SharePoint Saturday before. Could you kind of explain a bit more like what that event is and kind of what what happens?
It's intended. I mean, it is an all-day event, and I mean, depending on the city that it's been sort of a rotating thing from city to city. It's typically, obviously, on a Saturday, and it's it's an all-day event where it's attracted hundreds of people, and certainly from people that are just wanting to learn more to hardcore, users, developers, administrators, and it really is meant to be that more. It's informal track of really true community, and when you have these events, it is people from all over the region. I mean, some of our guys fly to ones around the region or around the country, mostly on their own dime. I mean, again, it's community driven, but trying to get that here to Charlotte because we've seen the success in the other markets, and we've seen the Charlotte community driving to these other cities. We really wanted to bring that here and get that momentum going, within the technology community here. And because now, within a lot of organizations, it's a platform that's being used but may touch different applications. It's actually having implications into other technologies that aren't Microsoft-centric. Integrating with a Ruby application, which we're doing at one of our clients, integrating with some other third-party apps. So there's a broader spectrum of folks who are getting involved that may not even be fans of SharePoint, but need to understand it because it's impacting their world. So it's definitely, that's more of the community-focused event that has a little bit more participant-driven agenda versus I'm coming here to do an hour-long presentation on a specific use of the technology.
So that's a very interesting point. So, I mean, when we talk about like communities and people coming together for learning to kind of advance their career, it's kind of very kind of understood as to why you would go to a session, a lecture style session, and learn about something you could apply the very next day at work, right? Justin, Barcamp really doesn't kind of naturally offer that kind of environment. What do you think going to a Barcamp really benefits? How does that kind of benefit people?
I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like a glorified networking event. I mean, you find very easily other people who have similar interests to you or are looking to learn similar things as you. So I'd say maybe half of it is probably that networking functionality, because you definitely leave knowing new people and knowing people in specific areas that you're interested in pursuing further, so you kind of build that. And secondly, I think it's just a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of times we'll have topics proposed, like some kind of like in-depth Ruby session or the future of journalism or something boring like that. But then we'll have stuff like some guy doing like balloon animals, like teaching how to do balloon animals, which is like not really tech and media, but the culture kind of allows for all kinds of different things to be presented. So maybe tech and media isn't the best description of it. That tends to be the majority of the content. But there are some just kind of general interest, arts, cultural, environmental kind of things that happen as well. So in a lot of ways, it's just a way for people to come together and kind of like just feed their brains with some cool, a trail mix of interesting ideas and meet people along the way to further that development as you leave.
Cool, so it's a salad bar and trail mix.
Yeah, right. Salad bar with nuts on top. It's very healthy for you.
So that's really interesting. We've talked a bit about like directly kind of learning, and we've talked a bit about, how that community kind of comes together. One side, I suppose, is really, a kind of more off-the-wall aspects, and the other one clearly fits into kind of career progression. Tyler, I know you're organising a new event, and I think in some way this is a kind of middle level between being a kind of collaboration of ideas, right, and being something that would be kind of career-driven. Would you like to explain a little bit about your newest project?
Sure. This is something called Startup Weekend, and really it's not a new event. It's been around for years, been hosted all around the country and the world for that matter. This will be the first time that Charlotte's hosted the event. Startup Weekend is something where you're bringing together technology folks, marketing folks, sales, legal folks, to build over the course of a weekend to build a company, if you will, from the ground up. So, you'll break the general idea is you start Friday with very similar to Startup with Barcamp, where people throw out a whole bunch of different ideas and they get voted on. And then on Saturday, you break out into teams around several of those ideas that were the highest voted ideas and build out that company during the day, Saturday and through Sunday. At the end of the day, Sunday, you will pitch your idea to the rest of the group. Essentially, it's more or less a competition, if you will. And different teams will have gotten further than others and have probably better, more solid idea with a website and a marketing, logo, et cetera, than others. And more or less will be sort of winners, if you will, declared winners of the competition. But the real goal of the weekend is just kind of a pragmatic way of getting different people from outside of technology to meet with the technology folks and sort of bring all that talent together in a way that you don't normally come across in sort of your day-to-day jobs or even some of the side groups that are very narrowly focused. So just a pragmatic weekend.
And so really it kind of crosses like a number of levels. And actually the idea is to involve like marketing and business and technology.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, it's almost a requirement. You're not going to have just a technology group, really come up with anything, that has the full range of marketing and legal aspects that you need to launch a company. So you need those other folks to be involved to really be successful.
Jim, I mean, that sounds like a really interesting idea, is to kind of cross those boundaries. When you kind of, in the groups you've been involved in, how much business kind of thought, how much of the sort of thoughtful business-facing kind of ideas do you kind of hear in the kind of networking side of those user groups? Or does it tend to be very kind of technologically kind of focused?
In the ones that I've been a part of, I would say very minimal. Minimal in terms of business-facing involvement. I happen to be a part of a language that is, I think you would call it, particularly sensitive to marketing. If they feel that something is marketing, it will be rejected. But there is some other. There are some substitutes within the Ruby community. There was actually the way that my last startup actually ended up, or my current startup ended up finding its genesis was at a Rails-focused version of the startup weekend. Now we don't have a lawyer or an accountant, so I'm sure we'll be out of business in a few months. But I think it really underscores the fact that these sorts of going through this is very valuable to get yourself to work in an environment with other people from different backgrounds, and to be in one way it's kind of results oriented because everybody wants to win, but in another, failure is completely okay because it's just some time that you took out of your weekend to sort of have some fun trying to do something creative and build something of value. And so I think that that's a very powerful idea, and it sort of makes me wonder why you don't see more users groups sort of like almost trying to recruit some other kind of like, let's have the web designers and the Ruby group pal around for a weekend and see if they can come up with anything, or that would be an interesting kind of I know there's an idea Matt Lefevre talked to me about at some lunch a little while ago about he wanted to have a sort of game server built, and then he wanted to have clients from all the different languages compete. And that's a way that you can get developers involved, and sort of in it's competition brings a certain amount of zest to what you're doing, but also you're still want to be friends with the people at the end of the day, and you learn sort of a little bit more about what each language is good at, and how it might fit with something that you'd like to do.
Cool. That's actually an interesting kind of point. I mean, we've talked about trying out ideas, coming together to try and almost play, enact, like creating technology or businesses as a learning experiment. Justin, you at CLT blog, you kind of started out with an idea and have followed that through fairly consistently, or consistently for a fairly long time now. What do you think the difference is between just trying out ideas and sort of fixing on an idea and like seeing how far you have to go along? Because there is a natural amount of time an idea takes to sort of crystallize. Do you think that it's is it just like trying lots of things, or is it, trying a smaller number of things?
So I'm going to say that
It's a trick question.
I'm going to say, I guess, two things. And one is just trying a lot of things. I guess it's in general not getting held up when an idea isn't perfect and just kind of rolling with it. I know a lot of, especially creative types, myself included, tend to, it's just not, that idea is not flesh enough there, I'm not going to work on it yet. But when, in reality, it's your own high kind of perfectionist standards that are preventing you from even trying, right? And oftentimes the idea you have in mind doesn't make any sense once you actually do it. So I think, on that sense, it's just being willing to try and experiment and possibly fail. Secondly, I guess I feel like every once in a while there's just an idea that kind of resonates so strongly that you believe in it so much that that kind of guides you through all the various little intersections and whatnot. So it's an idea like, for instance with CLT blog, it's an idea that I guess I have a background in it because I've been writing and blogging and producing like media content for a while, and I thought it was a good idea for this town. We really don't have that kind of like rich media, online savvy kind of outlet. So that at its core, I still feel very, very passionately about. And then with other things, in terms like we've tried various things on CLT blog before that went over really well, and we kept them, and tried some things that really didn't go over well, and we killed them off. And some things we never thought about that people suggested, and we tried and worked really well. So that general kind of responsiveness and allowing a certain amount of elasticity to your idea, even if it's not exactly what you had in mind, it can become something that you never imagined that's even better than what you had in mind, which is the case in many ways with what CLT blog has now become. So I guess that general just like being willing to experiment, but then even with that elasticity kind of, if your idea is strong enough to begin with, I feel like any of this number of things we experiment with don't really affect the central core, and that kind of carries me through all that stuff.
That's a very good point. I mean, one of the things here is, the idea of like sharing ideas, right? Is that these user groups are a place not only of learning, but also a place to kind of share your ideas, whether that be bar camp, startup weekend. So Frank, I mean, if you have like an amazing idea, do you think you'd go to startup weekend and share it with everybody just there and then? And I mean, do you think that people take their best ideas to something like a startup weekend, or do they take their backup idea?
I don't necessarily know if they take their backup idea. I think you maybe don't show all the cards, but I mean, I think you can leverage the different experiences and the different people to start to get maybe a glimmer of that idea, to see how people react to it. And really, I think one of the big advantages of the user group, the bar camp, any of these collaborative things is quite simply that you get heads down on things for so long and only see things in your world, and you get to really realize. And on one hand, it's good news, and on the other hand, it's bad news to see that people have a lot of the same challenges, a lot of the same problems. I mean, at some point you're like, oh wow, so it's not just going to change if I leave here. It's like that everywhere. But I think it's also you get to really commiserate with other people around some of those things, and you can problem solve and really gain momentum on your idea without necessarily even having to talk about the specific idea. I mean, I think it's the concept of how do I solve this problem. I'm at A and I can't get to B, and you sort of brainstorm on that. So if you're not comfortable sharing the $1 million idea, you may be able to work within that environment to still collaborate and start to solve, theoretical problems. I have a friend who has an idea, but I really do think that it's so highly collaborative, and you're seeing that other people have faced the same challenges as that you may be facing right there, and may have already come up with a creative solution without necessarily figuring out how to market your $1 million idea.
So, yeah, I mean, and that actually brings me back to something. We've talked about the people who kind of come along and they just want to share experiences. Jim, why did you start these users? What was the motivation for you in coming out and kind of starting these groups?
Jeez. I'd say the first time around, when I was in Richmond, the major desire was to learn more of the language. At that time, I was working in my day job was in Java, but my passion was for Ruby. And so, but I didn't know that much about it. And so I, wanted to find other people to learn with, because, it doesn't work for me just learning a little bit here and there. I need to have somebody to kind of work with a little bit and, bounce ideas off of when I'm at the very beginning. I just almost doesn't work without help for me. So the motivation when I came here was a little bit of a different shape. I didn't actually start this group. I'm just organizing it now. The previous organizer worked for a Rails hosting company called Engine Yard. And so, he ended up leaving to take another job with Amazon. And so he asked me if I wanted to organize the group. And I said, sure, why not? Jesse knows I love him, but he had he was scheduling the Ruby group in his country club where jeans and sneakers weren't allowed. And, so just moving us out of that environment, we started to get more interest and more attendance. And that's really kind of whatever I was thinking in my head when I said, yeah, sure, I'll be the organizer, changed after that first meeting, because there were a lot more people involved and interested with it than I thought there would be, and at a higher level. So, then it became a sort of challenge. How can I keep these people interested? How can I help them in their careers? That's for me, that's a major focus, because that's also what gets you more people in. We are putting butts in seats at the Ruby group. And so, I feel that that's something that we can, point to and say, hey, this is a big deal, come get involved. And then, just sort of the joy of having other people involved and finding interest in what you love. I think that's what sort of keeps me going with it, I guess.
You love Ruby.
I do. It's the thing. Me personally, I have to find some other things in addition. It's been too long since I learned my last language, but I don't think I'll ever, have my love completely die out. So we'll
Ruby's
see.
that good.
To me, it is. We get along very well.
So Tyler, that's a good. That actually brought up something else that we haven't really talked about yet. The Java user groups actually held at CPCC. How do you find these different events that you've been involved in the Java user group, and how do they actually work with the universities and with the schools? Do you see a lot of school attendees coming to the youth groups?
Absolutely. In fact, we've had entire classes show up for a number of the different topics where it was something that was a common technology that they were dealing with in the classroom. The teacher felt like it was a good topic to bring the entire class over, and we ended up having a huge attendance with those folks involved. Other times it's just one or two people, three people that were in classes that day or that evening that stay around and attend the sessions as well. It's a good environment. There's easy parking. All the multimedia facilities are there, so it really ends up being a win-win for both of us, because they're obviously dealing with a lot of the entry-level topics at the university, at the college, and then we're kind of building on that with some of the more pragmatic topics that are out there in the enterprise.
Cool. I mean, Justin, you yourself are at UNC, I believe. Yeah. So, how much exposure do you think the universities give these user groups that are out, like user groups and events that are kind of out in the community?
Yeah, not too much. I don't know. I could go on and on about all the various ways that the education, the higher education system, in this town, any city, fails to really capture. I'm sure in some of the more tech-centered cities, that's a more like a prevalent kind of interaction. But here, anyway, at UNC Charlotte, not so much. You really have to step out, right, and make it for yourself and find these places for yourself. And oftentimes you enter into these circles not under the context of a student, but of just a fellow entrepreneur, developer, whatever. So yeah, not really too awful much. I'm not personally taking like computer science courses there, so maybe I'm not the best spokesperson for that subject. But from at least the casual observer, the person who's generally interested in media, I don't see very much of that at all on campus.
So, I mean, Frank, you spend a lot more time, out there in a business development capacity, working with companies in Charlotte. How much do those companies that you're interfacing with, not you yourself, but the companies you're interfacing with, how much time do they spend like understanding user groups or community events like Barcamp or the SharePoint Saturday kind of events?
I don't think holistically the organizations take much of a focus on it. I think you're seeing that there's an individual evangelist within a particular organization that may be pushing it. That's one thing that, for the SharePoint user group, we really try to focus on is the venue actually rotates each time to a corporate location where they're utilizing the technology, and you get somebody in there who's the evangelist to be one of the speakers, to really get that buy-in. And what's funny is then you see some people trickle in, much like maybe a student trickles in at CPCC, you see these people trickle into the user group and go, wow, what is this? And they see 100 people in the room or 50 people in the room or whatever it happens to be. I mean, we did one at Duke Energy recently, and 3/4 of the room was Duke Energy, and you're like, wow, they kind of took our user group over, but it was good. It was all of a sudden people are realizing, wait a minute, we're using this technology. There's other people in the room who believe in this or who use it in different capacities. So we've tried to almost force the corporate buy-in by doing the events at their locations. But you really do, just with any group, you have sort of that top 10% that's the most active and the most driven, and they just happen to be the evangelist at their organization. But we've not seen a lot of corporate sponsorship or hey, how can we help you with that? It's really been because a particular person is active and believes in it and wants to try to sort of infiltrate their organization with it. They'll offer to have the event there. But we have found that sort of forcing it into the organizations that use the technology has gotten some good adoption in there. And then you get some people that came to the one on their site. You may see some of those faces at the next one that's across town, and I think it's helped the user group grow, because it's just gotten exposure to people that aren't going to get it exposed through social media or the email blast or those types of things. So.
Okay, and that's actually, it kind of brings me on to something else. I mean, we've talked about, user groups being fairly specific. We've talked about the Java user group, the Ruby user group, SharePoint, and then we've talked about these other events which are kind of more technology agnostic, Barcamp, Startup Weekend. I mean, lately, in those kind of user group settings, I mean, I've seen certainly the upcoming Java user group is actually based on a programming language that isn't Java. And the last Ruby group was actually based upon a database technology written in C. Jim, how is it, is breaking down those language barriers, does it kind of help the user groups, or is it just to kind of reach out to get a broader audience?
Well, I think that it is extremely important for all developers, no matter what language they're working in, to realize that there are positive aspects and negative aspects to every language and every platform and every data store, if you want to go that far. That's sort of been that's been a part of what's on my mind a lot recently. And yes, that is reflecting itself in the programming that I'm providing to the group. In fact, it seems like a completely apropos time to bring up an idea that one of our group members and previous podcast guest, Scott Netterman from NetPhase, suggested after our last meeting was, why don't, in the theme of, why can't we have conferences here? Like, I've been to, basically every Ruby on Rails conference, in the area or the big nationwide ones. And the one that I had the best time at was the one that was the RubyConf that was here in 2007. Charlotte is a great place to have conferences. And so, why couldn't we take a cue from our, sort of, we have a lot of corporate strength, we have great facilities. Why don't we try to put together a polyglot conference, which talks, you could have one track on databases, another track on programming languages and interoperability between them, maybe some other thing about, try to workshops or whatever that, you try to get over the hump with another language, so to speak. So I think something like that could be a real, cool thing, an awesome thing. This is this kind of thing that I'd want to go to. I'd want to, help organize it and make it a reality, Why not, right?
Okay, that is interesting. I mean, just to kind of, what do people think about that? Tyler, I mean, do you think the city's primed for like, taking what is a sort of a smaller scale activity and making them bigger?
Like you said, I mean, the facilities are great. Overall, I think the city it definitely has the capability of hosting that type of event. It's done the conference in 2007 you mentioned. We do, sports events and all that sort of thing here. So it definitely has the capability of hosting an event, large event. I think polyglot programming is very popular these days. As you pointed out, the Java users group is hosting something that's what's called a JVM-based technology on the platform. That's actually a different language, and it has JRuby, which is a complementary technology to the Ruby guys' programming language. So things like that, I think there's a lot more of that going on these days than there was 2-3 years ago. So probably something like that would fly. You'd get a lot more involvement from some of the other groups. Even Microsoft has kind of a alt side of things where they have the ability potentially to run maybe their language on a JVM as well. So yeah, some conference like that would be pretty cool. I think all the different user groups would have something that would interest them, some way to get involved.
Justin, I mean, you spend a lot of time reporting on the city. Is the city, are those things that, do you think the city's interested in drawing that kind of thing out and making it bigger?
I'd say in general, anything that builds community and builds focus on specific niche communities, especially bringing them together for common interests like we're talking about, definitely a big demand for that type of thing. People, especially right now, like to think that they see a future for Charlotte, and I think everyone agrees that Charlotte's future is very much based on more focus on kind of community building and growth in that respect, becoming less of a commuter town, and then more of a place where people are really kind of focused on all the various interest groups that make up the population.
And just as a finishing thought, Frank, I mean, do you think the business is ready for that? Do you think the companies you represent are hungry for that?
So. I mean, I think there would have to be a lot of thought around, what is the true value, the community value, what could get people excited about it. But no, I think so. I mean, I think I would agree that anything that can continue to elevate Charlotte as a community of, more than just the banks, more than just, a particular technology set. I mean, I think the whole point of the things we're doing here is to continue to, I think if maybe we bang the drum loud enough, someone will hear it. So, I think that would be, I think even just the publicity around an event like that as Charlotte as a technology hub in the Southeast, to bring people together from the Richmonds and the Columbias and even the Atlantas and the DCs, to really give that, start to create that inner community interaction and start to just get more publicity out around the technology community here, that it's not just a bunch of people going to work at the banks every day, and so no, I think it would be good. We'd have to make everyone wear colors by language. It'd be like gang colors,
different colored khakis.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I mean, I think we're just going to keep banging the drum. I want to thank everybody for an interesting talk and a chance to kind of learn a bit more about like the user groups and some of the events going on. Just before we do wrap up, I did want to kind of go around one last time and give everybody a chance to kind of talk about the upcoming event that they're behind. Frank, start with you and maybe the SharePoint Saturday events that you have planned.
Yeah, the SharePoint Saturday Charlotte event will be April 10th, and I believe it's just SharePoint Saturday edgeCLT.com/Charlotte, but I should have come a little bit more prepared with the URL. But it's going to be April 10th, which I know is actually the same day as Bar Camp. But and then the user group is the third Wednesday of every other month. So there's one this month on the 24th at Piedmont Natural Gas.
Make sure you tell them to come to the bar camp pre-party.
Yeah, we'll split it up.
There we go. And
Yeah, don't steal my people on Friday night. They won't show up on
they'll turn up
Saturday.
hungover on Saturday. And Jim, next Ruby user group?
Yeah, well, our next one, we're not going to make air date by. We have a organizational meeting tomorrow night at Amelie's. But the next one that we have scheduled after that is an event. We're having Kevin Smith down from a company called Basho to talk about a data store named REAC, which is one of the NoSQL databases. I wanted to give him he's involved in implementing it in using both Erlang and JavaScript in some very interesting ways. It's a data store with a lot of interesting properties that I'd like to have better understood in our user community. And I think that is April 6th. You can find our group at charlotteruby.org, or you can follow it on Twitter at CLTRB. And then I think it's also ruby.meetup.com/Charlotte-RB. charlotteruby.org will have links to all the rest of them.
Doesn't have a PO box as well, does it?
You can fax us at 704 Ruby. No, don't do that.
Don't fax. And Justin, the next...
Bar Camp 3 is coming up April 10th right here at Area 15. And on a personal note, I guess, CLT Blog is launching a new version of our site next week. So actually, by the time you're watching this online, it'll probably be live right now, so go check it out. We like to focus on these kind of community initiatives, so we'll be covering this and Bar Camp and everything else.
Sweet.
And Tyler?
Yep, sure. The Java users group meets the third Wednesday of most months. Check out our site. It's charlottejug.org. The other event is the Startup Weekends. That's charlotte.startupweekend.org, May 14th through the 16th. That'll be over at Inventi's, over just west of Uptown.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today and sharing all the stuff you've been getting on with, and I look forward to seeing everybody at the upcoming events. Thank you. And thank you very much. We will be seeing you again next month with another technology podcast. The end. Now I can have that bit.
You never got to drink it.